Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Thursday evening, May 11th, in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Looking here at the all hazards weather map on Thursday afternoon, we're just going to try to identify a few of the main features and what they're going to mean for this pattern and where it's going. Right now, we do have a lot of severe thunderstorms that are down here in this part of the lower Mississippi River Valley. There is a tornado watch that's out in this area, plus a severe thunderstorm warning going on right now this afternoon. But you do notice there are flood watches here. They come up the front range of the Rocky Mountains out into the high plains. And we do have another tornado watch in place right here. So what we're going to be watching is this wave that's ejecting. It's deep. It's sitting right here, just curled up tight in parts of Colorado. In fact, there's enough cold air in it to give us winter storm warnings at these highest peaks in the Rockies here in Colorado. But as I look at this pattern and try to assess where it's going, the biggest clues are actually this, and this. These are all heat advisories that have gone out, and this is an excessive heat watch. And that's really going to tell us, I think, where this pattern's headed and what it means for not only the near-term forecast, but the longer term as well. Now, in this morning's video report, I talked about the recent hail. So this is just a map showing where over the last 3 days we've used radar to detect where there has been hail across the country. And a lot of these storms this year have been big hail producers. But over the last few weeks, as I've been showing graphics like this one, we keep referencing the rate of accumulation of hail reports. And I was talking over this today with my good friend and colleague, Matt Reardon. And Matt and I were looking at this because if you notice, they break the years up. Everything before 2014 is dashed, and everything after 2014 is solid. And just looking at that, you start to notice that the years that are way above average are all dashed, with only a couple of them, mainly 2012 and 2013, being down here where we have all of the other solid lines. And we're just looking at it because I'd mentioned, I'm like, I don't know why they're kind of bifurcated. There's a group down here, or bimodal, and there's another group up here. And Matt helped me remember something that I used to teach. I can't believe I forgot it. But just to bring this to a point, back in 2010, there was a switch made by the National Weather Service. And this is the BAMS article for it. Or I'm sorry, it's on the American Meteorological Society's blog. And they made a switch from 3/4 of an inch as the minimum size for hail to be considered severe and get a damage report. They switched it from 3/4 of an inch to 1. And I think what we're seeing here is that all of these reports are when we used to include the 3/4 inch criteria. Now it has to be an inch. So I really appreciate Matt looking at this with a sharper eye than I did, but it just really kind of shows what's going on there. All right, from here, I want to show you where the current system is spinning, because this is a tightly wound cyclone over Colorado. And while you're watching that, you're going to see just lots of areas. Look at all the very dense cloud cover down here representing the storms that are moving out of Louisiana and Arkansas into Mississippi. But we're going to keep a close eye on the high plains once again today, and the risk tonight in this area, parts of Kansas and Oklahoma, for severe storms. Before I go much farther away from this, notice how we still have the smoke from the Alberta fires last weekend over parts of New England as well. You can see that pretty clearly here in the satellite imagery late in the day on Thursday. Okay, right now the storms, I always like to look at them in terms of lightning, but it just shows us where the most active storms are currently located. And we're going to keep a close eye on where these propagate overnight and then how this opens up into parts of Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma later on this evening. Now, these storms are going to be adding to the total precipitation we've already received in the last 3 days. And this map just shows you, going back again over the last 72 hours, some of the very heavy rainfall events that have come out of Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas, and then right in through here, parts of Missouri, Arkansas, down into Louisiana and Texas. And we want to know, are we going to continue to fill in some of these holes? Because if I were to show you the whole week's worth of precipitation, there are still a few places that have missed out on some of this rainfall that really need to get the best possible chance to get it. And those areas kind of show up pretty well in these two figures. What you have on the left is the 16-inch or 40-centimeter soil moisture percentile data from NASA. That's from April 11th. On the right, I have May 11th. And I put this in my report this morning, but I want to just address it again today. We have seen a pretty significant reduction in the size of the very dry soils, but there are still places. Look at this part of Nebraska and Iowa or Missouri. There's pockets in Indiana and Illinois coming back to Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, and then right into this part where parts of Montana meet the Dakotas and Wyoming, that these areas still need to see, significant increases in precipitation, bring the soil moisture up to just buy time as we go forward into the hotter time of year to avoid more stress with drought that could possibly show up, flash drought or just regional drought development. So speaking of drought, I do want to show you the latest drought monitor released this morning. And as we look at it, we still just see much of the plains just anchored in drought. Now, this doesn't include some of the recent rains, and certainly some of the heavy rains are going to come through and provide kind of some temporary relief from this drought. But it took us over 18 months to get into this Central Plains drought, and it's going to take a while for us to recover from it. There are still good chances. I want to make sure that that point is clear, that going through the end of May and even into June, I'm still seeing a lot of chances for hopefully a lot more thunderstorm activity in the plains. Now, what did the drought monitor do in terms of changing from last week? Remember, these colors represent where there's a class degradation, and this is improvement. Also remember that the data only go through Tuesday. But we can see throughout Missouri, dotted throughout parts of the plains, and right here along the Appalachian Mountains, we did see a one-class degradation, but there were a lot of places, look at this color, that we saw some improvement overall in the drought situation. So it's always good just to check back in to make sure we're monitoring how this fluctuates throughout the season. Okay, I want to take you right to the Storm Prediction Center's webpage, and let's look at the convective outlooks. This is today's, and we can break this down into tornado risk, wind risk, which would be winds over 58, and then hail, which we now remember is over an inch in diameter. And what we see here is that there's even a 10% or greater chance everywhere inside that hatched region of getting 2-inch diameter hail or larger. So this is going to be the corridor we're going to be watching carefully tonight. If we go out there and look at tomorrow, this would be Friday, we see a much larger areas kind of opening up here in parts of the western Corn Belt and then down into the south. Again, tornado threat highest near the low, which is going to be right here close to the triple point, 5% probability. We're also expecting pretty strong winds out of these. And again, the risk for hail getting into this part of Nebraska. And finally, if we work our way into Saturday, we're going to watch again. That low is pretty slow moving. So notice these two areas just kind of transition a bit farther to the east and north and then move a little bit farther south into Texas. Now, Texas is going to have a whole new suite of problems to be dealing with this week, and I'll show you that in just a second. But again, we'll keep an eye on Iowa as we get into the day on Saturday. Okay, high-res models to kind of get a good look at this. This is the NAM, just one I prefer, and I just want to show you where it's putting down the convection as we go forward. So this is tonight, Thursday night, working our way through the overnight hours. So again, we're going to watch carefully right in through this area tonight, and then on the back side, possibly another round of very heavy rain right coming through here, right around the core of that cyclone. You can see the storms that are this afternoon sitting right here on the Mississippi River. They're going to move into parts of western Tennessee and Kentucky. This is an area that needs this rain desperately. This has been missed. This area has soaking wet in the central parts of Tennessee and Kentucky, but missed western Tennessee and Kentucky. And then we're going to watch the rains hopefully move through parts of Missouri, clipping Iowa, Illinois, and we need to get more moisture here into parts of Indiana and Michigan as well. So that places us out to 2 p.m. on Friday. You can see the heaviest rains will be on the northern side of this. We'll just play this out through the day on Friday, and that's when the systems that are going to come through Texas, really adding a tremendous amount of rain, are really going to begin to show up. So as I just take you through the day on Saturday, we can already see the first round of very heavy rain coming through here. East of it, a lot of scattered convection. North of it, this is the remnants of the system we're watching for the next 2 days. But that's what we're looking at over the next about 60 hours in terms of precip. Now, I want to talk to you about the broader pattern because this is going to be important not only for the near term, but the long-term forecast. So here's the shortwave we're watching right now. And we're going to see that scoot right through Nebraska, and then it almost disappears, right? And what happens is, as we've been talking about, this trough moves out. We end up getting this ridge over actually 2 separate lows. And what this is going to do is this is going to temporarily block the pattern up and send some extreme heat into the Pacific Northwest, getting into Western Canada and the Canadian Prairie. But the flow splitting like this in general is what's helping to drive all of this moisture into Texas, into New Mexico and Arizona. And the pattern's going to sit like that through the weekend and even act a lot like this getting out into next Tuesday and Wednesday. So can you see it? There's the trough, there's the high, and there's the low. You get flow out of the northwest, which is going to be cooler for this section of the country, but this is going to set up this whole region down here to be extremely wet going into midweek next week. Well, mostly this weekend, but a little bit into early next week as well, while the Pacific Northwest up here into British Columbia are very hot. Now, just keeping an eye on this pattern. I don't see it breaking away from this through about the 21st, getting out there to the 22nd, 23rd, but there is a little bit of model kind of divergence once you get out here. This is really far out in the model forecast. But you can almost get a sense that by the end of May, we might be returning some southwest flow into this area again, which means the end of May could end up being active like this last 4 to 5 day time period is right now. So we'll watch for that again at the end of May, but you'll see in a few minutes what this flow is going to do coming across this part of the country like this in terms of suppressing precipitation, but also keeping the temperatures down. So let's do a multi-model comparison here. This is the WPC, so this is from the National Weather Service's Weather Prediction Center. So this is a forecast where there's humans that take the weather model data and then craft what they hope to be the best outlook. So this is valid from this morning through the next 7 days. Here's the 12Z European model, and this is the 12Z GFS. And to be honest, the models are in pretty good agreement on the pattern. And what I don't like is that they've got this hole right here in a place where we desperately need to get some moisture in. Both of the models have that. But remember, we have storms coming through this area tonight, so we'll need to see how much they fill that in. If you were to compare the GFS to the European, remember this is the color range for where the GFS is wetter, like down here in the southeast, this part of Oklahoma and Kansas, and pockets throughout the rest of the country, and this is where the European is wetter. So we can see that the system moving through the northern plains, and then the big system coming out of Texas is wetter. The European's also wetter in the mid-Atlantic and the Carolinas. So it's always good just to see the model differences, and that helps us to understand kind of which ones tend to be wetter or which ones tend to trend wetter or drier as we kind of examine all these different models. I'm going to stick with just the European today because I think the European has the better handle on what's happening in Texas, and I want to watch that carefully. So starting us off here on Thursday evening, again, these are the storm clusters we've already seen in the high-res model. So let's play through the day on Friday, get out there into Saturday, and we're going to park this right here about Sunday morning. Now on Sunday morning, this is what's left of the system we've been watching here this week. The new flow, remember, as a big ridge of high pressure builds in here. I should draw that arrow the correct way, like that. This is where we start to deliver all that moisture into Texas and New Mexico and up into possibly Colorado. So just notice, as we go through the weekend, this is Sunday getting into Monday, there is moisture coming through this part of Iowa, Illinois, and into parts of Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee. That will also eventually make its way clear out here on Monday afternoon and evening to Virginia, North and South Carolina. But while that bit of moisture comes across like this, I'll go back and I want you to watch Texas. Multiple rounds of rain fed on just a tremendous amount of Gulf of Mexico moisture. And all the way out there to next Tuesday and Wednesday, we're still watching this. So that's cloud cover, that's rain, it's going to be cool, and it's going to go in and hit one of our, one of our driest regions right in here in the plains. So these rains are absolutely critical to the success of the growing season in Texas. As we play this forward out a week now, we're out to next Thursday going forward. One thing we will be seeing a lot of as this large ridge develops, need to draw those arrows the right way. They spin clockwise, okay? As that large ridge develops here, there'll be a lot of scattered convection in the mountains. The mountains are going to pop with storms while we have high pressure cells with cooler air moving through the Midwest. That's going to be the way this pattern's going to shape up, probably into the third week and beyond for the month of May. So let's distill it down my favorite way by looking at these probability maps. This is 12Z data, so this started this morning, okay? But what you've got here is the next 10 days looking at the probability of an inch. Here's the probability of 2 inches, and let's go up to 4. So high probabilities down in Texas of getting at least 4 inches of precip. I do want to point out, though, that you do notice this area showing up in the ensemble as missing out on the heavier rains. But again, we will watch this area tonight, especially central Kansas, for strong to severe storms, as we noted here from the Storm Prediction Center. But why I'm watching this so carefully is because going back to the beginning of March, that is an area that has been driest compared to their own climate district reporting standards and history. It's been one of the driest areas compared to the past. So we need to revive moisture in this area. All right. What about week 2? Well, during week 2, we have split flow. So the flow's coming over the top like this. There's a trough of low pressure here, and it comes underneath and kind of skirts along like that. That's what the jet stream is up to. And as I've been telling you, in spring, flow that comes out of the northwest through the Canadian Prairie into the central United States, if it were summer, this would produce a lot of thunderstorm activity. But in spring, it's convergent flow aloft, which means compression and multiple rounds of high pressure. So we have to wait about another month and a half before that flow delivers storms. But as it stands, we see a lot of moisture coming to the Four Corners states. And this is a year that I'm very worried about the Four Corners states for July, August, September not having a strong monsoon, primarily because of the evolution of this El Nino. Let's talk about the temperature side of this next. We're just going to look at the 5-day sliding window of average temperature anomalies because we cover the details in each morning report. As we play this forward, as the ridge builds over western Canada and the Pacific Northwest, that is where the temperatures are going to be possibly 25 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than normal on some days. We're cooler where the trough is here in Ontario and Quebec. We'll be cooler through a swath in the middle. Actually, not cooler. This is just seasonal temperatures, normal. But it'll be cooler down here where the rain and cloud field is going to be from the systems coming around the base of that split. Now, how long does it last? We just play out there now through the 3rd week of May and get right up here almost to the last week of May. And we see that the pattern doesn't really break too far away from this. I don't have any frost risk on major growing areas in the United States or even the southern Canadian prairie going forward. All right. So what I want to do with you next is I want to take you to what the heat in the West has got me very worried about. So this morning in my report, I talked a bit about the snow water content that's still in the Sierra Nevada. And we covered last week the flooding that's happening in the Tulare Basin. And I want to make a point here that this is showing you, when you look back, how much water is in that snow in a percent. And this is compared to historical averages. And you have some places that are 3 to 5 to 800% of normal, and a few locations where the snowpack is still extensive. I mean, it's still at least 80% of what it was at its peak this winter, where we're almost 2,000% of normal. Now, I want to show you an important difference here. This is this year, and this is last year. And what you just saw here is a significant drop compared to a year ago of what the snow looked like in the Sierra Nevada. Now, the problem is, if we just go back to 2023, this snow will be melting under the heat that's coming to the west. And that starts to be very concerned about how rapidly it does this, how rapidly it melts in the Pacific Northwest, and what that can mean toward flooding as we go forward. All right, let's now break away and talk about the longer range stuff. The ECMWF in its forecast of the MJO has caused it to kind of stall right here in phases 6 and 7. I had hopes that it would keep moving around, but right now it appears that we're going to lose the MJO signal going forward. Because if you look at these Hofmuller diagrams, all right, they're kind of confusing to look at here, but what we're looking for are these stripes. And then this is the forecast from this line forward. And there's just no strong signal overall as to where the MJO will be, which has me worried it's just going to stay in phase 6 and 7 a little bit and maybe collapse back into null space. What is interesting, though, about this is if I flip this over and show you the zonal wind pattern, we have right now these westerly wind bursts occurring in the forecast coming off of Indonesia. And that is a strong indicator of what is going on right now with El Nino developing. So this is the kind of signal we need to see in order to know if El Nino is going to develop. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because I've told you for the last couple of weeks I don't have much confidence in the long-range forecasts, in the 30-day outlooks. Remember how we've seen the models really flip-flop back and forth? We talked about that Monday. We even talked about how they did not do a good job predicting this, 3 weeks ago. So it's no surprise that I show you the newest update. This would be from May 26th to June 26th, and now it's gone back over wetter in a place that it was dry. Now, I can make sense of this, because I think we will be, by the time we get to the end of June, realizing this El Nino event that's coming on. And at that point, if there's still split flow in the west, we get storms out of this. And there's some indications in the model height field that could be the case. But just look at it with a grain of salt. And that's kind of been the narrative we've carried. Now, brought up El Nino, this is an important part of our discussion. This is the current ocean temperatures. And what we've watched over the last week and a half is that this negative PDO signal, which is denoted by the cold water, and remember, that cold water typically brings less extreme heat to the west in summer and more risk of heat and drought in the Midwest. This cold water signal has begun to kind of fade. And looking here at the latest data from Tropical Tidbits, a fantastic website, one of my favorites, we've noticed that in the last 7 days, this area right off the coast has now shown a warming signal overall. So just observing that and trying to understand what that means going forward, we need to pay close attention to these ocean temperatures because, as I showed you, there is a large ridge coming out to the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia. And underneath this, there'll be clear skies in this area. The sun will beat down on this. It'll warm that up, and I expect to see a transition more toward a weaker PDO signal going forward. Now that lends itself nicely to my narrative, and I understand that my narrative of the PDO weakening and the El Nino strengthening. But don't just rest on this just yet. There's still a negative PDO signal right now, which means we have to watch over the next 30 days how much it changes. That's going to be the critical time. When we get out to early June, the assessment of these ocean temperatures will be very important for what the summer's going to hold. And right now, the latest update from the Climate Prediction Center, which was just released today on May the 11th, they now have by June, July, August an 89% chance of having an El Nino. And then after that, it's well above 90 all the way to December, January, February. And I can completely concur with this, of course, because we've watched this transition happen. But I just want to show you something here. Let's restart this. This is the South American side, the Australian, Indonesian side, and this is going down in the Pacific Ocean. And there is a lot of warm water compared to normal that is going to be surfacing. Now, will the atmosphere continue to give us these westerly wind bursts? And we're talking about, these. That is the sign. That right there must continue in order for this to be called a true El Nino. And if that occurs, we'll continue to see this emergence, I would say, of the warmer water, and it will likely give rise to, this as a forecast for summer. So I just want to summarize this one more time. This is the National Multi-Model Ensemble on the right. That's 7 different models averaged together, and this is the European on the left. They both have weak monsoons. They both see generally above average precipitation here. They have different outlooks for the strength of the Bermuda High. That's going to be the trickiest part of this summer forecast. When we get into June and July, does the Bermuda High maintain its strength and therefore deliver moisture to the southeast, or does it weaken and possibly promote some higher pressure here? That would help everybody to its west, but it would not do well for the southeastern part of the United States if that takes shape. So I'm concerned about that happening. Now, you know that throughout this year, I've kind of had an analog year in the back of my head, and that year has been 2009. I just want to show you a newest update. Remember, one year cannot make an analog. This is literally just a speculative look at one year in the past that I think just holds the greatest similarities. There's no guarantee that this year will shape up like 2009 at all. It's just a similarity in the ocean temperatures. That's May 10th, 2023. This was May 11th, 2009. And if I just go back and forth here, you start to notice, maybe blur your eyes and look at it, that there are a lot of similarities. There are definitely differences as well. But if I were to show you all the other years, they are drastically different. But 2009 has some similar characteristics. All right? One thing that is different this year than 2009. 2009's El Nino was slow in developing. That's not the case this year. And by May of this year, we've already eaten away at some of this negative PDO signal. See the difference? So therefore, it's not a perfect match, but it's one of the better ones. Last couple things I want to talk about. First is South America. A lot of chatter just about the dryness. The monsoon just kind of let go. And as a result, we see much drier conditions in central Brazil. So Mato Grosso do Sul, Paraguay, Paraná, getting down to Rio Grande do Sul. That's the southern growing area right in through here. It's not, it's quite normal for it to be drier this time of year to the north. And the crop in the north is much farther along. In fact, I was watching today some of the videos put out by Farm Doc Daily. Those are guys out of University of Illinois, and they're in Mato Grosso, and I saw some amazing corn there. There are still some afternoon showers hitting this area, but it is just a drier signal. Anything planted late in the south, I'm concerned about. And this also kind of keeps the drought going down here in Argentina. Last thing I do want to look at, though, is the NDVI values. I picked out those states, leaving out Rio Grande do Sul because Rio Grande do Sul was very dry earlier and then just rained a bunch. So it's really come up in its NDVI. So we're going to leave it out. But from Sao Paulo here to, from Santa Catarina to Paraná over to Sao Paulo and the states north of it, we're still sitting in the top, part of the distribution on the NDVI values. So maybe we see a peel back in the total production, but I don't think it'll be very much. Finally, one last map for you today. It's just our global temperature outlook for the next 10 days. Just want to show you where the heat is and where it's not. Europe is cooler. Russia is cooler. Australia is cooler, quite a bit cooler. We've had a very cool autumn down here. But do note that in South America, very warm conditions are coming in during this next 10 days, which is drier. Also note, the Iberian Peninsula is finally getting a break from their excessive heat. Okay, that's what I want to share with you today. We'll talk to you again tomorrow morning. Until then, have a good rest of your week. Thanks.